A lot of times I hear us, in terms of getting to a place of maturation, we're still really early on this curve, and we're saying sentences as though, AI strategy is a thing. That would be like saying, what's your hammer strategy? What's your internet strategy? I mean, these are tools. They're not a thing in of themselves.
In pharma, we have to stop treating patients as a diagnosis and start treating them as people, because an individual is a patient only for a tiny fraction of their day. The rest of the time, they're a consumer navigating an incredibly busy and complex life.
Hello and welcome to the MM+M Agency 100 podcast, brought to you by Merge. I'm Lesha Bushak, pharma editor at MM+M, and for today's conversation, we're talking about the future of AI, healthcare marketing, and delivering whole human experiences. And we'll discuss how Merge is embedding AI into its foundation to create more contextual, emotionally intelligent, and consumer-centered brand experiences. I'm pleased to be joined by Stephanie Trunzo, CEO at Merge, and Pat McGloin, Managing Director of Health at Merge. Stephanie and Pat, welcome to the show. How are you both doing today?
Awesome. Glad to be here.
Yeah, thanks, Lesha. Looking forward to a great conversation.
I want to start out by congratulating you, Stephanie, on your Pinnacle Award honor. It was great to celebrate with both of you at the event. Can you tell me what this recognition means to you and to Merge as a whole?
Thank you. Yeah. I mean, well, first of all, it was a fantastic gala. So it was a wonderful event. It's always nice to, I think, receive recognition for the work that we're doing. So that was lovely and quite an honor. I think that really the award for me and for Merge is about the why behind the award itself, which is, we're really interested in making sure that we're bringing together, I think, my health background with my tech background and combining that with the power of the marketing expertise that we have at Merge. So I think that the award is truly more a recognition of the spirit of what we've been doing over the last year and a half to kind of evolve and transform where Merge is headed. So flipping a little bit of the traditional agency model into something that is a bit of the moment, thinking about how we leverage AI as a way of really changing the model and thinking a little differently about the paradigm shift that we need to adapt so that we are doing the best jobs that we can for delivering messages out into the market enabled with the right kind of technology. So that's kind of how we think about taking the entire health ecosystem into the future alongside all of the great promise that we have with AI.
Yeah, and piggybacking on that, obviously a huge congratulations to Stephanie for her visionary leadership. And thank you, Lesha, for helping us to look forward. Seeing Merge's evolution firsthand under Stephanie has brought an entirely new energy to how we show up for our clients. What excited me most about looking around the room at the Pinnacle Awards was the line between kind of traditional healthcare and consumer-driven tech had really evaporated. And so when I think about that from the perspective of a pharma brand, you just can't just market the molecule anymore. We have to build the digital ecosystem that supports the molecule. In the past, I've talked a lot about pharma needing to move from producer to problem solver, and inherent in that thought is having an appreciation for the whole human. There are behaviors that we can help shape beyond the prescription that will improve adherence, quality of life, and ultimately outcomes. And, really AI makes the ability to do this at scale a reality.
Mm-hmm. Right. You mentioned kind of this transformation over the last year and a half, and obviously AI has been a topic that has been in almost every conversation in this industry over the last year and a half. But my next question is kind of two-part. The first part is, what role do you see AI playing as a whole in the industry moving forward as of 2026? And then the second part is, I'd love to hear from both of you how Merge has been implementing AI specifically within your agency. And, as detailed and gritty as you can get with that, I would love to hear about that.
I'll kick off here. I think, I was in DC for the first part of this week talking with policymakers and regulators about what changes that we could expect to start seeing in regulation, in policy as a result of thinking differently about how AI is causing us to adapt both in the marketing industry and the healthcare industry as well. And I think one of the things that I took away from, the couple of days of conversation is that my new prediction or hope maybe is that by the time we get to 2027, I'm not sure I can hope for this year, but that AI becomes our second sentence, not our first sentence. We're leading so many conversations and questions, and myself included, with AI as the first topic. And really, AI is, first of all, it's not one thing, right? It's a massively diverse tool set. But a lot of times I hear us, in terms of getting to a place of maturation, we're still really early on this curve, and we're saying sentences as though, AI strategy is a thing. That would be like saying, what's your hammer strategy? What's your internet strategy? I mean, these are tools. They're not a thing in of themselves. And so my hope and what I see evolving is that we start, pivoting the conversation back towards what are the new opportunities that are getting created? What are the problems that we're solving? And the second sentence is about how AI is helping us do that, rather than leading with, what is your AI strategy? So, I think that is what we're going to see changing in the way that we evolve our thinking in both the health industry broadly, as well as marketing and technology, is, thinking a little bit more deeply about what is the strategy itself? What is the fundamental evolution? How do we, as Pat said, think differently about the way that we approach messaging, approach understanding audiences, understand that AI itself is sort of a co-pilot in the sense that humans have to be the ones driving the tool. We have to be the ones feeding it the right kind of information. We have to be the ones that are adapting the way that we want it to work and the way that we want it to show up in our workflows and the way we think about automation. So I think that we're going to shift our mindset as we get a little more sophisticated in understanding the breadth of what AI is. AI is a conversational agent. AI is a generative tool. AI is a set of agents working across an operating system. AI is automation and efficiency for workflows. AI is a way of translating content to every individual user, every, N of one audience that we want to deliver to at scale. It's so many things. It's not a single thing. And, I'll let Pat kind of chime in here, but I think that there are a ton of things across that entire spectrum that we're doing at Merge. And to your point, we can get into the weeds a little bit of like what all of those things are. But maybe before we go to tactics, Pat, you could talk about your strategic view too as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Like as Stephanie said, the real magic of AI isn't in that kind of back office automation. It's in the ability to operationalize your strategy, or, in our case, we talk about whole human marketing. So the ability to operationalize radical empathy. We're using it to translate dense, intimidating clinical jargon into clear, actionable human language, giving patients and caregivers the support they need to really have those focused conversations with their doctors, making sure that they're equipped to have real meaningful conversations. And that's a matter of being able to deliver the right information to them in a contextually relevant way so that they're prepared, or as prepared as possible, to have, what's likely going to be a very heavy conversation with a clinician. So really, when you think about AI, when it's implemented responsibly, it's ensuring context, right? So you don't have that algorithmic blindness, like sending an email blast, pushing a new walking path to a patient who literally just got out of ankle surgery. So it can really make sure that our engagement with that patient matches their physical reality.
And, you mentioned how the shift is going to be a little bit on, what solutions does AI provide and like what challenges does it solve? So, in some of your processes of implementing it at Merge, what are some of the solutions that you've been finding in the last year or so that AI has really been kind of providing results on?
This is something that a lot of us, myself included, we're born and bred learning about, AI is not a new thing, right? It's new in the sense that we are now turning it into a consumer driven technology that's ubiquitous in a lot of industries. But I think one of the things that we're learning at Merge is that there is a real disconnect between the way AI promise can really be delivered and the fact that you need a true experience to accompany it. And so Pat was sort of alluding to this, but, having automation or having tooling that lets a doctor minimize the amount of time between seeing one patient and the next patient and quickly getting up to speed as they walk in the room. And the patient being able to know that as they immediately walk out the door, they're going to have their next steps ready for them. Those are all amazing automations. But two things, you have to know how you want to map out that experience so that it still feels like you are working with another human. And as Pat said, it's about bringing that empathy into the story, into the experience, not just the automation and the technology. And I think the second thing is that thinking differently about what you're measuring as well, because a lot of times we see, I think the kind of default measure is to say, well, it saves time. But saving time in and of itself is not an outcome, right? Like that just means you need to redeploy the time in a different way in order to get a different outcome. In the case of healthcare, saving time could mean that you're actually restoring burnt out clinicians back to a more balanced state. And so saving time might be a good measure as long as you can correlate it with improved outcomes or better workforce retention or whatever actual goal that you're trying to achieve. So I think one of the things that we're learning at Merge is that as we implement and look at AI, we're being very careful that we don't use it to outsource our thinking around what the experience needs to be. And we don't use it as a cheat for proper measurements and proper outcomes.
Yeah. One of the things that, Stephanie did, I think it was like one of the first things she did when she became our CEO was establishing the Merge AI Garage. And a lot of the innovation that's being incubated in the garage is focused obviously on healthcare. And within that, we're laser focused on ensuring that any of that innovation that comes out of the garage is trustworthy. And so, in healthcare, and you think about it, privacy can't be an afterthought. It has to be the foundation of everything you build. And so for our product development, it's actually a feature. Right. So thinking about it in terms of not something that's like you're doing because you have to, but we're doing it because not only is it the right thing to do, but we're actually making it a forward looking feature because you can't really scale innovation if you compromise trust. And that's why things like, cybersecurity and HIPAA compliance are being baked right into our AI infrastructure. And practical application of AI is a super hot topic with the pharma executives that I'm talking to. And actually, I talked to a number of them this week alone. And, multiple conversations with top 20 pharma executives, and they're craving a partner who can separate the signal from the noise as it relates to AI. And really like what's real, what's hype, and what can you do pragmatically to help me advance? And when they're asking the question of like, how do we deploy AI? I always go back to like, what actual human or business problem are you trying to solve? Right. So, cause chasing technology without a strategy, as kind of Stephanie was alluding to earlier, is really a bridge to nowhere. So making sure that you have the strategy nailed first, and then you're looking at AI as an enabler to that strategy to better deliver on that promise that, your brand is looking to deliver on.
And just to double down on what you said there, Pat, I think, this week as well, I was with a chief clinical officer for one of the major health systems. And we were talking about right now, I think that the points you were making on having HIPAA ready, having enterprise grade understanding of what it really means to have proper security, thoughtfulness about privacy and consent to the point of trust. I think that right now, there are that gap between understanding AI and what the experience needs to look like and all of the enterprise rigor around it is creating a lot of opportunities for people to create vaporware, things that look on the surface like that they are operating in a certain way. Like I can spin up with AI a dashboard of sorts and make it look like it is connected to real-time sources, make it look like it is giving you accurate and real-time data. And if you don't have people who really can kind of look under the covers, understand that what you're seeing on the glass actually represents the kind of rigor that you want in your technology, and that experience that you're seeing is truly robust and that there is something substantive behind it. I think a lot of people are, unfortunately, rushing towards an answer that is very shallow, and that is going to cause problems down the road. So I think that a lot of across the health ecosystem, regardless of whether you're talking provider or life sciences or pharma or payer, they're all sort of struggling with making sure that the things that they're being pushed to do because they want to gain these efficiencies, or that there are budgets that are getting constrained because hopeful that AI will be able to solve it, that they're doing it in a way that is really going to be rigorous enough that it pays off that promise, and that the value that we know we can get out of AI is not creating a different kind of problem that they have to solve later.
Right. And, one of your roles as an agency is to help support your clients kind of on their own journey of transformation and making sure that they're scaling their AI processes and really just embracing them. But every company is sort of on a different scale when it comes to that. Some are a little more willing to experiment and embrace AI, and others are a little maybe slower to adopt it. How do you help companies get to that point?
Well, I think one of the things that's kind of fascinating about the last year of change that we've seen is the obvious one, which is a different kind of appreciation for the unique human skills that we need to value and honor, like empathy and judgment and these kinds of things. I think the second one, and to your point, different organizations are at different points, is change management. And I feel like that phrase, for decades has a little bit been something we throw away. We say it's the first thing to cut. It's the thing you don't plan for intentionally. And I think AI is forcing us to think differently about what change management actually looks like. So I think that the organizations that are already maybe built with a little bit of resilience, they're built with, perhaps a tech first mindset that says we're always iterating, that nothing is ever done, right? We're always continuously improving, are set up to adopt AI in a slightly different way. I think also the firms that are really clear on what their strategy is, and, to the point Pat was making, they know what their problems are, or they're able to articulate that, then you can bring this tool set to bear. So we're working with our clients kind of at all different stages of maturity to understand, where do they need to get tighter on really understanding themselves, or understanding what their mission or purpose or their strategy is, so that we can help them apply AI. And we are helping them think a little bit differently too about where do you experiment and where do you build a longer term plan and think a little bit differently about that. I talk a lot about the pendulum is swinging really fast right now. And at some point, everyone's going to normalize that pendulum. And it's better to be sort of at the stable point. The stable point are what are the things that are going to always be true for your business? What are the things that are your true differentiators? What's your mission and your strategy? And let the things that are innovation, low risk, what they're experimental hypotheses, let those be the things that you're experimenting on and you're letting people play around with and get their learning experience on. And think a little bit more rigorously about the elements of your business that are at that core, that are the stable points that you need to address with real enterprise understanding.
Yeah, I mean, as Stephanie mentioned, a big part of this, I would say it's kind of central to the change, is this change management and making sure we're being really thoughtful about all of the implications of the change management. And earlier this year, we launched the Humanity Suite, which is really helping clients to understand how best to approach this change management journey. And so we aligned our offerings to the 6 most common challenges we're seeing across the industry. Basically, they're designed to be accelerators to help them really get their arms around, what exactly needs to change, and then basically provide a roadmap for implementing that change. One example is pharma data is notoriously siloed. Right? Sales data doesn't talk to the media data, which doesn't talk to patient support programs. And so with our foundational offerings, we start with an acknowledgement that their data is siloed and messy. And then we fix the data plumbing first in an organized way so they can actually route the information dynamically and compliantly. So that when you're eventually, you're ready to move to those agentic workflows, you're not having the agents navigate a data lake that's going to result in hallucinations, right? So just, starting with good hygiene around those foundations, even if you're not ready to leap into the deep end of the pool, so to speak, as it relates to AI, getting your house in order foundationally will accelerate your AI adoption, regardless of kind of where it evolves.
And I think that the Humanity Suite, the way that we developed it was intentional in the sense, as Pat was saying, there's 3 foundational offerings and 3 impact offerings. The goal is really for all of those to be conversation starters with our clients so that we are helping them navigate what that change management journey looks like for them from the starting place that they are at. And if we talk about creative for a second too, it's as equally as much about the example that Pat gave that is around your data and how do you think about your data as it is about your content being developed and created in a way that is a lot more adaptive, that you have it in a composable model so that when you think about creative content, humans are coming up with these big and brilliant, bold ideas, and that the system is going to actually be able to take those ideas and, create the infinite number of assets that they might need out of it, that the technology is actually built in their MarTech stack to use that content and creative in a way that then it gets it out to the audiences correctly. So the Humanity Suite point really is to kind of go the whole way around the circle of here are the foundational things you need to do for creative, for data, for technology so that you have that foundation set. And then here are the things once you have that foundation, you can do differently. You can have a fully adaptive system. You can have a growth engine where you're looking at how do I open a new channel or a new audience that I didn't even know that I was going to be able to reach because I didn't have this understanding previously. So I think our goal really with the Humanity Suite is to take all of the things that we have learned both as an agency who has done consumer side and, deep regulated health side work, take the best of our understandings of both of those things, as well as all the conversations that we've been having in market and with our clients, and bake it into something that, to your point, everyone is at a different starting point. So there is no one size fits all answer, but we can guide them there based on wherever it is that they need to start from.
And, you mentioned this idea of building the whole human experience or these experiences. And, I imagine that ties into sort of your approach with the Humanity Suite. So can you talk a little bit more about how you build those and sort of the significance of those?
Yeah, whole human marketing. I mean, frankly, it's a philosophy I think is true, not just for marketing, but we are in the end, we're who we are. We put on different roles and we put on different hats and we make decisions through different lenses. But at the end of the day, we're still just this same single human being. And the idea with whole human marketing is that if I am able to reach someone because I understand exactly what their context is, whether I have actual information that I'm going to serve up to them or just the recognition that Stephanie as a CEO is also, Stephanie as a mom, Stephanie who is sending her daughter to college, Stephanie who enjoys practicing yoga, understanding these things about humans, especially as you think about how applicable that is to health. It's the same as having the idea about as a whole human, how do you look at your health proactively? So we don't kind of go through life like saying, I'm in this role right now, or I'm in that role right now. We go through life as the same person that we are. And so our concept of whole human marketing is that now, because of technology, we are capable of doing a lot more than we ever were in the past to understand those nuances and be able to allow people to provide that information in a way that is going to then bring benefit back to them rather than, I think some of the prior eras that felt like understanding anything about you became creepy or was an invasion of privacy, right? This is more about honoring with integrity people providing that information in a way that is going to serve them so that, Pat mentioned this earlier, but one of the biggest goals I have for us as an agency and just generally in the world is that health information and getting people to change behaviors quite often is just the difference between someone understanding and not understanding the information. And so if we're able to make a difference because we can think a little bit differently about, we understand their zip code and we know they're going to have a transportation issue. We understand that, they have 3 school-aged children. Maybe that's some information that would be helpful as we give them a care plan or as we think about how to identify them for a trial or, all of the things that we're doing across the spectrum of our health clients. So that's really what kind of the philosophy that sits behind whole human marketing.
Yeah. And if I just build on everything Stephanie said, in pharma, we have to stop treating patients as a diagnosis and start treating them as people. Because an individual is a patient only for, as Stephanie was just saying, only for a tiny fraction of their day. The rest of the time, they're a consumer navigating an incredibly busy and complex life. So if you think about therapy adherence, it's not episodic, it's on a daily, oftentimes a lifelong time horizon. So how do brands show up before a patient starts a new therapy? How do we support them through their condition and side effect management at home outside of the clinical walls? That matters even more. So if a pharma brand is only interacting with a person when they're filling the prescription, it's a very transactional relationship. And you fail to build a trustworthy relationship with that patient or that caregiver. And so things like the Humanity Suite ensure that the infrastructure is in place so we can communicate across the whole human journey and really avoiding that cognitive dissonance so that we can build real brand trust.
And I think, something else you said there, Pat, just triggered for me that, I think a lot of times in our current or previous world, maybe not even current anymore, we're trying to solve problems that the system's presented to us. So to give you an example, we are trying to solve problems in, let's say, patient portals that are messages in Message Center are not getting routed to the right place, or we need a different way of looking at scheduling because appointments are a problem. But fundamentally, like the reason that a human comes to that system is not to book an appointment. It is not to send a message. Like no one wakes up in the morning and says, like, my goal for today is to book 6 appointments. That is not what they're doing. They're coming to that system because their knee hurts or, they need care in some way, and understanding more about what their actual intent is or their need is unblocks some of those systems problems that a lot of our clients are spending money, time, and energy to solve for, when really that isn't actually the problem, right? That's a byproduct of not solving the real problem, which is understanding what humans need at the beginning of their journey.
Yeah, all of those things are really important takeaways, I think, as marketers move towards AI, but they really need to keep that whole human perspective in mind because that's going to be absolutely integral. And to wrap up, I want to talk about video games. Merge's game for the Agency 100 this year is based on Minecraft, which I love. And I feel like that has special significance for you. So how does Mergecraft work and how does it show up? And, I'd love to hear more about that.
So we at Merge say that we're built different. And so if I think about, what Minecraft is, it's fundamentally something very simple. It is elegant, right? It is actually hiding a lot of the complexity. Minecraft is an enormously complex set of technologies, systems, user community, art, creative. It's all of those things. But on the surface, it seems extremely simplistic. It's blocks. And I think one of the things that we attempt to do when we talk about how Merge is built different is allow all of this unique complexity, but ensure that it feels simple on the front end, right? That we're making all of that complexity feel fun, simple, understandable, consumable. And I think one of the things that is the coolest about Minecraft and how it applies to the way we think about being built different is that it allows everyone the ability to create. It is a platform for curiosity, for exploring, for freedom of innovation and invention. And so, it's outside of my daughter when she was younger, developing as many cool things as she could in Minecraft. And I do really enjoy seeing what kids come up with there. I think it is a great metaphor for the way we also think about how you should build and, kind of empower others to be part of that building as well.
Yeah. And to, pun intended, build on Stephanie's point, our structural integration is really, I think, one of our biggest advantages. So like in Mergecraft, we've intentionally brought together 3 different worlds that rarely sit at the same table. So deep, rigorous life science expertise, world-class technology capability, and consumer-grade experience design. And so, and I always say innovation lives at the intersections. And so when you're bringing those 3 disciplines together, where they come together creates, real true innovation. And so if I, again, put a pharma lens on it, we understand heavy, complex, regulatory guardrails of FDA guidelines and OIG compliance and, all the payer dynamics that, our pharma marketers have to navigate. But instead of letting that compliance slow us down, we pair it with consumer grade marketing agility. We know how to navigate the strict boundaries of pharma, but we also know exactly what makes a human click, engage, and then ultimately trust a brand. And so thinking about true wellness, because really that's kind of ultimately, like Stephanie was saying, ultimately you're trying to get to wellness. And whether you're navigating a patient portal to try to, find an appointment, what you want to do is feel better. And so it's not a chart or a lab value. It's physical, mental, emotional, and even based on the data that we published at Built last year, it's increasingly financial. And so making sure that you're, taking into account all of those dimensions is really important for being able to, connect with that patient and affect real change and hopefully real improvement in their overall well-being.
Absolutely. Well, I love that concept. I personally have never played Minecraft, but from what I've seen of it, it does seem like such a rich and detailed world. And I love the concept of world building in it. So I think that was a great choice on your part for Mergecraft. So Stephanie and Pat, thank you so much for joining us. And as always, thanks to our listeners for tuning in, and we'll see you again soon. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you.